Take a move in the ring. You can hit me with the words you fling.
Real pleasure to be joined by an old mate of mine, Lightning Mike Angove, multiple-time world champion, Muay Thai boxing expert, analyst, commentator, absolutely lives and breathes the game, and of course a striking coach for Israel Adesanya and numerous other stars that you will know well from City Kickboxing. How are you, Mike? Good to see you, mate.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Really nice to be on. You missed out, philanthropist, brain surgeon, Nobel Prize winner.
There you go, mate. Wear many hats. It's got to be done, man. Maximum respect, though. There's not many in the game who have achieved what you've achieved. I kind of want to open with that, actually. How are you juggling this Clark Kent Superman lifestyle between, cornering Izzy and some of the other boys around the world and keeping a day job? How does that work out?
Oh, look, it's not the easiest thing. I've been fortunate, and I had a fair bit of leave saved up, which we've needed with Corona. And it's not easy though. We've literally we're approaching our second week of isolation or quarantine back in New Zealand, but effectively the prior couple of weeks while we're overseas in the US and Abu Dhabi, we're also in almost full isolation. Our team has done 7 coronavirus tests in the past 18 days or so. So if that gives you any indication of what it's been like for us, it may look flash from the outside, but in actual fact, living out of a suitcase in multiple hotel rooms is not the easiest thing to do. There's certainly been no celebration, no partying. It's literally been get out, get the job done, get back to the country, and we're already training in quarantine. We've got a couple of other guys, who are competing in the UFC shortly. So that just means we're back on the job, and it's definitely difficult to juggle, particularly in the crazy world that we live in now.
So it's just a constant grind. Is there any plan? Because I feel like this game moves so fast and the highs are so high, the lows are so low. Is there ever any plan, I don't know, whether it's Christmas or whatever, to take a moment to have a breather? I mean, you guys as a team have achieved so much in the past few years. Do you ever just take that moment, take a weekend, take a week and reflect on everything?
Look, we would like to, but it's a question of not being selfish with what you're doing. We've got Dan and Izzy, and Dan's now also a main event or a semi-main event fighter. And they tend not to fight in rotation. Sorry, they tend not to fight on the same card now. So, that means that's a constant consideration. We try and get other Kiwis on those cards. And of course, outside of the UFC, we've got fighters fighting in Brave, in One, in Hex, in any number of sports. In actual fact, we've got a really important boxing match coming up with the Junior Fa, who's number 6 in the WBO, and he's fighting Joseph Parker, who's number 3 in the WBO and also former world champion. So, there is literally no rest for the wicked. So we're constantly punished for our crimes or our success, if you like.
You must be absolutely loving it, though, because, I opened it saying that you live and breathe this stuff. It kind of doesn't get better than that. I know, like you said, it's not always glamorous, the quarantines, the COVID tests, but must be an unbelievable buzz, not just to actually have some gold to show for all the hard work of the team, but just the momentum you guys have got and the team spirit as well. From the outside, it looks like that's just second to none.
Yeah, look, we've been very fortunate. We do have a tremendous team culture. You've got some very, very smart men in coaching roles. You've got a very, very good leader in Eugene, who is able to pull, different brains together to collaborate and bring together strategies. And that's pretty critical. And then you've got a team who are trained really in a similar way. They're smart, they contribute, they're very close, and everyone has a role. Like any team, you have different personalities, traits, different styles, but the strength is in the bond within the team. And, it's very, very close. Occasionally big brother will argue with little brother, but that's totally natural as well. And I guess you could see that, in the response directly after Izzy won the fight, when you went back to our little team anthem. And that the story that goes with that is that's the song that Eugene used to use to wake everyone up in the morning when we all went into quarantine. So it unofficially became the anthem after it was our alarm for for so many weeks.
That's awesome, man. I didn't know that. That video was quality. I mean, there's been a lot of interesting kind of tidbits, right? Because you're a bit of a storyteller yourself. You're no stranger to a meme either, and I've actually been really interested at some of those glimpses of the story. I just spoke with you about kind of taking some time to reflect, but what you seem to be doing really well along the ride is capturing some of that.
Yeah, well, I guess that goes hand in hand with being a journalist and a commentator and an analyst at the same time. You interweave those elements into, I guess, the story you want to tell. And in many ways, fans like to go on the journey with you. And I guess in the world of social media, telling a story is the way I like to do social media. I guess I'm not the trolling social media type. I've had to say bye, Felicia, to a few knuckleheads who come on and think they have the right because they're in their grandmother's basement reading porno magazines to speak on an equal footing with fighters and coaches and be abusive. So they get pinked out pretty quick. But those who want to come on and analyze and have a genuine conversation about fight sports, that's the kind of fan that I enjoy, albeit that very clearly, the best willing, kick him in the head, take him down, as Israel said, twisters, beep, beep, beep. Those are the guys who pay the bills. But yeah, it's telling a story, bringing people along on those very historic and epic moments. And Israel in particular is the kind of fighter who has that very elusive X factor that brings all that together. He's an artist as much as he is a fighter. If you look at the guy, he was also a graphic designer before he became a fighter. And you can see that in some of the work that he does. He's a very creative guy. He was a dancer, and he's a model. And he's actually very smart. So you throw all those things together with a guy who can kick butt at not just a world class level, but at a pound for pound level. Then you've got an extremely attractive package. And it's great to I guess literally have a cage side seat to some of those special moments.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think you summed it up super well there. It's an X factor, right? It's almost something you can't put your finger on. Not many fighters have it in and out of the ring as well. I thought his performance on the mic after the fight was almost equally impressive. The way he speaks, it's just everybody's listening and everybody's watching and everybody's buying a ticket. So it's a very exciting time. I just want to ask you, because, you've known Izzy for years now. You've always known about his talent. Jon Jones is somebody who many would agree is misdemeanors aside, probably the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. But if I'd have said to you, when you first met Izzy, that he would go on, and because now I couldn't tell you, I think Izzy could probably beat him. I really feel that way. Did you always feel that he was that good? Because he really, at this moment in time, it's difficult to say who wins that fight. Izzy could well beat Jon Jones, and that's an incredible thing in itself.
So look, there's a story which I've kind of imparted before, which is when I first meet Izzy, and I'd seen a couple of his fights. I met him in Wanganui, where we both lived. That was the second city he moved to after he came to New Zealand from Nigeria. And I said to him, and there's a clip after the Whittaker fight. 10 years ago, I told him he'd be a world champ. And Eugene was the same. In fact, although Eugene saw a couple of his fights earlier and thought, meh, and then Israel did what champions need to do. He packed up his life and he made the move. He made the move to Auckland. And he found a coach who he gelled with, and he found a team that he gelled with, and the public persona aside, the loyalty and the strength of Israel actually as a person, which people don't necessarily get to see because they're not close, is really something that has, I guess, transcended, the sport and the public persona. Izzy's loyalty is to his team, and the people around him, and his family, and those in need is second to none.
Yeah, he's as I said before, just an absolutely fascinating character, and I think that's shining through now more than ever. He says he wants to fight again before the end of 2020, which I think will be music to the ears of the fans, Dana White, everybody. So I guess that's probably reliant on Whitaker, Cannonier coming out of that one with minimal damage, right? What from your perspective would you rather the Cannonier fight? It seems to be the fight he wants, given that he already convincingly beat Rob. And how do you see that one? Are you a fan of the fact that he's kind of championed Cannonier and pointed him out as someone who deserves the shot?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's in the lap of the gods. It's who wins that fight, really. It's clearly a number one contender shot. Rob, you've got to credit him. He's got straight back on the horse. Got a decent victory over Darren Till. It was a hard-fought victory that he had to overcome being knocked down early. But he figured Darren out. He adapted. He's shown his ability in multiple fights to get up from being knocked down. That also occurred against Romero. His recovery is very, very good. And he found a way to win against Till, who is a very good striker. He's a little bit methodical, Till. He can get a little bit predictable, but what he does very well, particularly early in the fight. So Rob did really well there. Cannonier is a little bit static, but he can bang and he's durable. And Rob, I wouldn't say has a granite chin. I would say he can be hit, he can be hurt. But those powers of recovery have served him well. But against some fighters, you've got to be very cautious about. You can't take those big shots. And Cannonier, when he lands, tends to have that lights out quality. Yoel Romero, to a certain extent, has it, but his is more of a thudding shot. Cannonier, in the fights I've watched, and we've only really just started to study him, when he lands, has a little bit of that lightning bolt about him, very quick twitch. So there's different styles of knockouts as well. George Foreman, again, had thudding power. Evander Holyfield, when he hit you with his left hook, it had that kind of lights out power. It was a different kind of power. So, Cannonier, I think, fits into the latter category there. But interesting fight. I think Rob's probably going to be the favourite in that. His entrances are unorthodox. He's well-rounded. He can take it into a wrestling realm, and that's where Cannonier has come undone in the past. But again, you've got to be cautious with a guy who has good wrestling defense. Investing a lot in trying to get the takedown. And people are getting very good against the cage, very good in the clinch, and they're also adding the elements in of hitting off the break, or you defend a takedown, then you look for the opportunity to counter off that. And if someone tires themselves out and then they get out into open water against a striker, that's not always a great option as well. So there's some intricacies that in that fight that I think are really, really interesting. But I think Rob's faster. I think he's more versatile. But I think Jared can hit the lights out switch.
Yeah, I think whichever way the chips fall, we're going to be in for a good one if that happens before the end of the year. I just want to again go back to Jones, just because the back and forth between these two on Twitter, as we've speaking, I bet that they're continuing, because it's just ferocious the last few days. Maybe because Izzy's in quarantine as well, right? But there's so much heat behind this, and you have to say that it would be a special part of mixed martial arts history. We're witnessing history with Izzy now, but it almost feels like these guys, they have to fight now. I know you don't, there's a reluctance, right, to encourage a fighter to leave his weight class when he's been such a great champion, but Izzy's now beaten 7 out of the top 15 already. If he beats Cannonier, that would be 8. So I think Eugene has already mentioned that the move to light heavyweight is almost the natural progression now. Where do you stand on it? When will we see the Jon Jones fight? Is it inevitable? Does it have to happen for MMA history? And do you like that move to light heavy for Izzy?
Yeah, look, I think the Jones fight will happen. I think Jon can wait his turn. Israel's never deviated from the fact that he wants to do justice in the division and clear it out. We work to our own timeline, not to the timeline of Jon Jones. All this thing started because Israel was asked, would you fight Jon Jones one day? And he said, yes, he would. Right. And Jon is the kind of guy who can't leave that alone. And Israel's the kind of guy who really struggles not to respond. So there's two, substantial personas there and two great champions in their own right. And both of them, particularly Jones, once he got rid of the, I'm a choir boy persona, and probably his more real persona came out. He's a guy who's controversial, and he's been in the news for a number of reasons, extramurally from the sport, but even his approach, his demeanor, the DC fights as well. They really brought it out, and they showed a side that the public hadn't seen before. What's interesting though is that the Americans will always back the American fighter. And look, if Israel was American right now, you would see, and Jones was from a different country, you would see all the American fans backing Israel. So there's plenty of patriotism going on there as well. It's not about their judgment of their personality qualities. Let's face it, Jones over time clearly has some issues there that he needs resolving. But as a coach, we couldn't give a stuff about that. We are just interested in, how do you defeat the guy who is the greatest of all time? We know he's slowing down a little. We know that he has had trouble with guys who had good speed, who have been of similar height to him. Gustafsson gave him some trouble because he was of a similar height. Dominic Reyes gave him some trouble. He's a southpaw who's quite mobile and can fight off the back foot. But he's also a guy who is a similar height. So people are talking about Israel, not being, not having the reach advantage. Well, hang on a minute. Jon Jones doesn't necessarily handle guys who have good talent at his own height either. And that's demonstrable. You have a look at the fights that he's had. There's something that he has to consider. He's never faced a striker like Israel in terms of the quality of the opponent, the ability to make the reads, a guy who probably has more versatility in striking than he does, a guy who is quicker than him. Clearly Jones has got a great chin. He's got a really, really smart ring IQ. And, he would want to use his obvious size advantage, and he'll want to use his wrestling at some point in the fight. Question is, no one's seen Israel on the ground. No one's seen Israel really in a drag him out wrestling match yet. So they don't know. And Jon Jones, to be frank, doesn't know. He thinks he knows. And that's the whole point. Everyone thinks they know. But until you get into a position where you're in the ring and the two guys, have towed the line and they're shoulder to shoulder and they've been put in difficult positions and they've, like bulls butting heads. Once that happens, then you know. And my experience of Israel is that his learning capacity is huge. And there's things that he does in the gym that no one's seen in his performances to this point because he hasn't needed to go there. So, there's those factors in there. And clearly Jon Jones, he may have to go into his kit bag. Every fighter has a kit bag. Every fighter has a toolbox that they can refer to and they can pull tools out of. And both of these guys are guys who've got a lot of tools hidden away. We don't always see it, but they're definitely there. So it makes it an intriguing fight from an analyst's point of view. I think Jones would most certainly be the favourite, but from a coaching perspective, Jones isn't the unbeatable monster at the end of the game. He's fallible. He's beatable. He's arguably, I thought Reyes won that fight. Jones won 4 and 5, but Reyes probably won the first 3. The first Gustafsson fight, there was an argument for that as well. The Santos fight, there's an argument for that. And what have you got in common with those guys? Good strikers, And Jones didn't go to his takedown. Second fight against Gustafsson, he did. He went straight to the takedown. So, that's something to take into account. The other factor is miles on the clock, and people are referring to them in their chronological age. Jones is 33, Israel's 31, but Israel is he's got a lot of ring miles on his clock, but he's not got a lot of damage. He's shown no signs of slowing down. His speed remains there. He's shown signs of improvement. Jon, by the same token, is showing signs recently that he is slowing down. So, people talk about, Israel not being a kid, but relatively speaking, he appears younger in his performances, and that's what you've got to have a look at. So, yeah, interesting fight, fascinating fight. It's not going to happen this year. Sorry, Jon, you can wait your turn. Maybe there's a light heavyweight strap that's on the line. That might be something that Israel might want to achieve first. You get a fight, get the possibility of becoming a champ, and then you look at Jones. Jones at the moment has indicated he's going to heavyweight. So the only reason he's turned around is one, because Israel's flavor of the month right now, and he wants some of that shine. 2, because clearly it's going to be a big money fight. So the longer they let that bubble away, I think the greater the pay-per-view will be. So it's in both their interests to keep on sniping at each other for a little while, and and see how it goes.
That's why you call Mike Angove for a bit of analysis, ladies and gentlemen. You're the man, dude. It's quality, absolutely quality. Go and follow this guy on all social channels, Mike. Where can people catch you?
I should really know, but Instagram is Lightning Mike Angove. Facebook is the same. Hopefully there's only 1 or 2 of me in the world, so pretty easy. You'll see, fight photos everywhere, and the odd political meme as well. But yeah, look, it's great to get on there. Just like to add, while the shine goes to Israel for obvious reasons, we've got a great team. Alex Volkanovski is in our team. He's also a UFC champion, and beating Max Holloway twice, remarkable achievement, particularly in the second camp with the issues around lockdown. Dan Hooker, who's in arguably the most difficult division out there at the moment that Habib heads up. He's a guy who's been a hair's breadth away from really a big fight against the likes of Khabib or even McGregor if he decides he's going to come out of retirement. So, those guys are just utterly world class. Brad Riddell coming up. He's an absolute savage. He's had 3 of the most difficult fights you could imagine. You don't see normal prospects treated like that by matchmakers. And he has overcome them, each one of them. And this is a guy who's been thrown basically 3 grapplers and 3 very strong grapplers, and he's handled them. He's handled them very well. In actual fact, he's dominated the latter portion of every single fight. Kai Kara-France and Shane Young, guys who Kai's still in the top 10, and despite that last loss. Shane Young, 18 months out, coming off a shoulder injury. Again, not great the last one, but he's another guy who has huge talent. So that's a pretty robust team, and we're not just about Izzy, we're about the entire team, and we bleed together, we cry together, and we win and lose together.
Yeah, 100%. That's a bit of a dream team. I mean, all the names that you reeled off there are exciting to watch. They're really, really doing something special. I mean, just as a wider body of work, they're all fighters that I think the fans watch very, very closely. And again, I think that's testament to, you've got to call it a golden age, right, at CKB. And I really enjoy the relationship with Tiger Muay Thai over in Phuket. I mean, most of those guys have had a little spell over there. Frank Hickman, I know, comes and trains with you guys, trains the wrestling over at CKB. So I think that's pretty cool as well. There's a bit of mutual success going on.
Shout out to Loma for her win on the weekend as well. It was great to see her coming back in. Interesting, her previous opponent, Angela Hill, did a great job in the commentary seat, I thought, as well. So, but yeah, Loma's coming up, over 200 fights. And when you have a look at her and Georgie Hickman, Frank's brother, in her corner, she's so much smaller. She's in the lightest division in the UFC. She's actually so much smaller than the other girl she's fighting. And people don't realize that. Typical of the Thais, and they're almost always fighting above their weight. I just wanted to acknowledge that as well, because as you rightly say, Tiger Muay Thai is a brother or a sister or a gender neutral gym to City Kickboxing, and we do have very close ties. Same with Joe Lopez and his freestyle gym in Australia, who's obviously Alex's coach. And if you want to have a look to success, you look at the way that we operate as a coaching team across different gym environments, where there's a lack of ego in the way that we approach that. And I think that's really critical when you start to consider, how do you have a successful team? How do you build a culture of success? And a lot of that is often having the smartest people in the room and not being so big-headed that you can't take advice from other people in the room, and that's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very cool time to see this from the outside. Of course, we're over this side of the world in Asia, so it's interesting seeing those three gyms doing so well and against kind of all the big boys in America. And you could argue that sometimes the American gyms probably think that that's the center of the world, and it's not always the case, as we're seeing.
Yeah, look, no doubt. And, there's some great gyms in America, and we've made some great friends there. Equally, there's some magnificent gyms in Brazil as well. But look, we're one of the best gyms in the world too. And coming from a little country of around 5 million people, where we don't get any funding, where we don't get any government support, where we literally have paved our own way. And a lot of us, despite being at the pinnacle, we still have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. So, that is, something I think that we as a country, and even within Australasia, it's something we can be proud of.
Yeah. Mate, I think that's a whole other issue, because I think we can all agree that there's not the reward that there should be as yet, even in the top level of the game. It's ridiculous when you compare it to the NBA, the Premier League, the NFL. It's absolutely ridiculous. So let's hope that changes. But I don't know. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other day, probably.
Yeah. And then you start to talk about, what are the cultures of different sports? What's the sporting culture? What's the landscape? What generates the cash? So it's a long and in-depth conversation. But look, certainly I think with MMA, UFC in the Western world, one championship, with what Chatri's doing in Asia as well. Loving the way that he's brought both MMA and Thai boxing and K1 rules back up at the same time. He's managed to do that as well, which, again, something that is difficult to do. Is when MMA is the flavor of the month, he still retained that loyalty and engendered that interest in in the stand-up striking arts. And obviously that's my first love as well. So look, we are in a golden age, if you like, and it looks like it's going to continue for some time yet. So I'll just slap the sides and ride the waves.
Pick a move in the ring. You can hit me with the words you fling.